This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcasting Network. I'm your host for today's show, Tuesday edition. As always, my name is Josh Strickland. Here we are, last day of March. What a terrible month it has been, just in general. You got the whole COVID-19 thing, whatever, but there's no sports. That's kind of a big issue there, especially for someone in my shoes where I have to record a podcast on sports 3 times a week. It's kind of difficult to find things to talk about, but we have a full slate. We got a full show for you today. We're going to be talking about the NCAA. They finally voted on the extra year of eligibility for college athletes, spring athletes. We also have the NBA Players Association Vice President perspective on the NBA season, whether or not they'll come back and what would happen if they came back. I'll also talk about how Bill O'Brien sucks as a general manager. Then, topic 5, we'll talk about Michael Jordan documentary being released early, ESPN being gracious there. And then topic 6, we are not going to do the random sport of the day today. We're going to do sports. We're going to talk about sports movies, which is kind of the go-to for a lot of radio and podcasts when they don't have anything to talk about. So we're going to jump on that bandwagon and talk about sports movies there. And so let's discuss esports. I've discussed esports before in the show. I've discussed like golf. They were doing an e-tour or whatever. I've discussed the NBA 2K League. I've discussed League of Legends, all this stuff. Esports is becoming more and more popular as we go on in society, because the younger audience, the younger generations, they love video games a lot. I mean, it's just a fact. And now there are video game competitions. Competitive video games are some of the most popular video games just in general, whether it be on Steam, which is a PC, a computer platform, whether it be on Xbox. I mean, MLG, Major League Gaming, has always been a thing, which is... They did Halo, they did Call of Duty, they did Counter-Strike, those kind of games, the first-person shooters. But now video games are becoming more and more popular as we go on, as more and more people start playing video games, and video games are becoming more and more part of pop culture and stuff like that. And eventually it was going to leak into esports, especially with sports simulation games such as Madden, MLB The Show, NBA 2K. With these games, it's basically the same as the sport, except it's just virtual, and you have guys just sitting at a computer playing instead of, athletes who train their body to be physical specimens. But now, with the absence of sports, as you are aware, if you've been listening to any sports media for the past while, there is no sports because of the COVID-19 coronavirus. Originally it was no audience, then it turned into just canceling everything in the NBA, and then MLB pushed back the opening day and stuff like that. So now there is an empty space here, and we've been discussing it. There's nothing to watch, especially if you are a mostly sports person. I mentioned on the last podcast that I have more than one interest. Video games is one of those interests. But esports have always interested me. I'm not like a big watcher of them. I don't like watching all the big events or anything like that. I've watched some competitions, and they're pretty interesting to say the least. There's interesting people in every scene, whether it be fighting games like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or even Super Smash Bros, or it be sports games. I mean, there are different crowds that are in all of these. Schools around the world, around the country, are now starting esports clubs and esports teams. I know down near where I live, the Peach Belt Conference, which is just a conference that's based in Georgia, South Carolina, I think North Carolina a little bit, that conference, they have completely adopted esports. Esports is a scholarship sport for the Peach Belt Conference. They have conference championships and all that. They compete in seasons based on the different sports. And there's so many opportunities for esports to kind of get into the mainstream media with the absence of regular sports. You've already started seeing it, and the first instance of it was NASCAR. NASCAR, they turned to iRacing, which is a racing simulation game. They turned to iRacing, and they've had two races, I think, so far. That was basically just NASCAR, except in iRacing. So, it's very interesting. Virtual racing has been a small saving grace for motorsports since the coronavirus hit. It's been on national TV. Timmy Hill's iRacing victory on national television gave the journeyman driver and his sponsors exposure they would never receive during a normal NASCAR weekend. iRacing is a big thing where people are getting into these huge rigs. Like, there are actually rigs that you can buy where it makes you feel like you're in a race car, and you can get a steering wheel, and you can pretend you're actually driving a real car while playing this game. And that's pretty much what most of these guys are doing now. It's getting IndyCar, it's getting NASCAR, as I mentioned before, and NASCAR is fully broadcasting it because might as well broadcast it live. Why not? And then NBA, you've already seen it with Aaron Gordon, I believe. Aaron Gordon streamed him playing NBA 2K, playing what would have been their games on Twitch, which is a video game streaming platform. You see that. I know the NBA is now trying to... So the NBA already has the 2K League. They already have the 2K League, which is these guys who play NBA 2K. There's a draft. There's a draft. There's contracts. Like, you get paid $250,000 to play NBA 2K, the newest NBA 2K for this league. And the NBA announced that there will be a 16-player NBA 2K tournament lasting 10 days that will begin this Friday, with ESPN set to broadcast it. So sports shut down around the world. As I mentioned, NASCAR made the most noticeable shift to esports with races that it airs on Fox. Now the NBA is apparently ready to follow. Fox also aired a Madden tournament this past weekend. I forgot to mention that. They aired a Madden tournament. Reddit, the college basketball subreddit, has been broadcasting their own March Madness tournament in NBA College Hoops. Not in NBA, but College Hoops 2K8, which is an older game. But they haven't made a college basketball game since 2009. So that's been going on as well, and that's been getting decent numbers. But the NBA 2K League also postponed. Cousins, who missed almost all of the last two seasons due to injuries, is scheduled to participate, but there's no word on who else may be in, even with a league full of known gamers who occasionally hop on live stream. Players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, Paul George, LeBron James, Anthony Davis have been on the 2K cover in recent years, but can they actually play at a high level? So this is going to be interesting to see. I'm interested in the ratings. I feel like we are so starved for sports content. It's very likely that next week I'll be talking about all esports stuff. Like, I'll talk about what happened in this. I'll talk about what happened in the Madden tournament. I'll talk about what happened in iRacing. It's a very good chance that could happen because there's nothing else to talk about. So, esports, this could be the time for esports to kind of get in their own lane and kind of make an audience out of themselves, because they're getting this full-time exposure, because you can play esports, you can play it all online, you don't have to be near each other, and you can have the whole setup where people can commentate away from the crowd and stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to see how it grows. It's going to be interesting to see how it grows. Esports could be the next big thing. People have been saying that it's the next big thing. It's kind of a money hemorrhaging thing to invest in, but esports gets a lot of investments. Like I mentioned, NBA has their own league. Madden has their own league, or EA has a Madden league or whatever. And these are big time events on their own. League of Legends, they have huge events with 100,000 people watching it, or not only around the world, but in the stadium. So esports could be the next big thing in sports, especially with all these eyes being upon them in the upcoming weeks, as regular sports are kind of just not there, man. It's a way to fill in that hole that people are so desperately wanting to be filled. And it sounded dirty, and I apologize about that. But it's going to be interesting how it goes. It's going to be interesting if the stigma around esports changes after this whole pandemic goes away. When we come back, we'll talk about the NCAA. They made their decision on the extra year of eligibility.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, as I mentioned on Sunday's episode, on Monday, the NCAA Division I Council voted on whether or not to give spring sport athletes, which that includes baseball, track, softball, tennis, I think, maybe tennis. I'm not 100%. I know some tennis is played in the spring, some tennis is played in fall, depending on where you are. But spring sport athletes, would they get an extra year of eligibility because their seasons were cut short because of COVID-19. So just to roll it back, just in case you didn't listen to the Sunday episode, the NCAA, when this all happened, they just completely canceled everything. They canceled all sports. It originally started with no audience, just like the NBA, but then after the Rudy Gobert thing, all of it was canceled. They completely canceled everything. There will not be a March Madness. There will not be a College World Series. No championships. No track and field championships will be played. Everything got canceled. So now you have a bunch of spring sport athletes who don't have, that lost a full year of eligibility. Should we give them a full year of eligibility back? Which I think, yes, of course. But there's a lot of different issues along with it, like financial flexibility. We have to give them scholarships. We have to give them room and board. How would the scholarships look? How would the freshmen that are coming in, how would they feel about it? There's a lot of logistics around it that we'd still need to work out, and I think the council worked it out. I'm not 100% positive on that, but so here we go. So the NCAA's Division I Council on Monday approved a blanket waiver for spring sport athletes whose seasons were cut short due to the spread of the COVID-19 to get an extra year of eligibility back. Financial aid for each athlete whose eligibility would have otherwise been exhausted in 2019-20 will be determined by the individual institutions. So that means each college gets to decide, pretty much. The news was celebrated as a win for athletes and as a positive development for sure. But as is so often is the case, the devil is in the details. We got to go through the details here. Not every current senior will be offered the same level of financial aid next year that he or she has right now, which makes a lot of sense because that's a lot. That's a lot of money to just kind of throw out there. Some might not get offered any, which, in my opinion, I mean, if you were a senior at college, you're a senior. You're more than likely going to graduate. I'm not sure how that's going to work with classes. I'm not sure if they're going to take classes or they're just going to kind of be kind of sort of like a graduate athlete, I guess. But this will allow schools the maximum amount of flexibility moving forward. Winter sport athletes, including basketball players who are a week away from the NCAA tournament, are not included in this decision. So that makes a lot of sense because they played their full season. They had closure, unlike the spring sport athletes did. The only thing they had was the tournament, which it sucks for teams like Dayton, sucks for San Diego State, these teams that wanted to prove that they belonged in the upper echelon of the sport. And then, of course, in women's basketball, you have South Carolina, you got Oregon. Those two teams were on a collision course for each other. And it's very sad that we're not going to see that matchup in the women's basketball tournament. But they are not included in this decision. Financial flexibility is important from an institutional perspective because schools are already receiving significantly less money from the NCAA, like we mentioned on Sunday, than they normally do. They're getting I think they're only getting $25 million when they usually get, they get $250 million as opposed to $600 million. Wait, one of those are wrong, but I think it was the first one that was right. But state schools already expect to take another hit in terms of appropriations for higher education. Football powerhouses are bracing for COVID-19's impact on the upcoming football season. If we have a football season, which, like I said, I mean, I personally believe is a little too early to make a call there, but we don't know. But we need to maintain control over cost, especially amid these uncertain revenues. We don't have the guaranteed revenue of having these events happen right now. We have no way of having this guaranteed revenue. We talk about TV money on Sunday. These schools are going to miss out on TV money because there's no TV. There's nothing to be on TV for. The council's decision gives individual schools that flexibility to make decisions at a campus level, said Penn Athletic Director Grace Calhoun, chair of the Division I Council. The Board of Governors encouraged conferences and schools to take action in the best interest of student athletes and their communities. And now schools have the opportunity to do that. The NCAA membership also adjusted financial aid rules to allow teams to carry more members on scholarship to account for incoming recruits and student athletes who had been in their last year of eligibility who decide to stay. So that answers the freshman question. So rosters and stuff like that are going to be expanded only for like 1 year. So there we go. I'm glad we figured that out because that was a huge question for me. It's like, how is that going to work? It's actually going to be kind of interesting to see how that works from now on because I understand the seniors are the only ones that get that year of eligibility, but it's going to be kind of weird because, it's just going to be weird for freshmen, especially because you're going to have to wait a little longer to take the spot that you believe is rightfully yours. But so anyways, schools will be able to use the NCAA's Student Assistant Fund to pay for scholarships for those using the extra year of eligibility in 20 and 21. It's unclear how much money is in that fund, considering other cuts to the NCAA revenue distribution to Division I schools. Those involved in discussions surrounding Monday's vote understood that whatever decision was reached would set a precedent. Universities aren't even sure they will be able to start classes on time next fall, let alone whether a full fall sports season can take place. If the council had voted that schools must match scholarship costs for all spring sport athletes, those schools would potentially put themselves on the hook for 85 football scholarships alone in the coming season were to be affected. But if athletic administrators support the idea of eligibility relief while maintaining financial flexibility where they can tell certain seniors they will offer little or no financial assistance if they want to return. That's an easier pill to swallow moving forward. So the question of whether or not there will be a college football season this fall looms over conversations in college athletic circles these days. The financial impact of not having a football season would be immense for Power 5 schools that rely on television rights and ticket sales to fund their athletic departments. In fact, multiple Power 5 conferences oppose the idea of matching the aid that seniors receive this year for those who want to return for an extra year in 2021. Multiple people with knowledge of the situation told The Athletic they took that stance despite the fact that their schools bring in more revenue on those that don't sponsor big-time football. The fear of a fall without football and football money is clearly driving certain decision-making. Some smaller Division I conferences did support matching aid across the board. It was not a case of big schools versus little schools, with the bigger budget places the only one willing to absorb the cost. Ultimately, all sides reached a sort of compromise, allowing them to give players who saw their careers cut short abruptly a chance to have a full senior campaign, while also allowing schools to figure out the financial cost of doing so. With so much uncertainty heading into the fall, it's worth remembering the lessons of the spring, as the deep pockets that so many college sports have had for so long are viewed in a new light. So it's a rare instance, but the NCAA did the right thing here. College athletes, spring sport athletes will now be able to come back. Whether or not they have a scholarship or not is debatable. But once again, I feel like most of them graduated, so they could probably be like a graduate athlete and not have to worry about classes and stuff like that and not need a scholarship. So that would be nice. I'm not sure how that all works. I'm not sure how graduate players work. So that's going to be interesting to see. But the NCAA did do the right thing here, which is a very rare thing for me to say. I usually never say that. The NCAA usually screws over their athletes at any chance they get. So the NCAA doing the right thing here really helps, first off, their image. This is a no-brainer decision in my opinion. If they did anything other than what they did, then they would be looked in a terrible light, and it would be awful for everyone around the NCAA, anybody making decisions in the NCAA, and people would be mistrusting the NCAA more so than they already do. Now, on the topic of paying players is a different one, but that's not the topic we're talking about right now. We're talking about athletes getting their seasons cut short, and they're going to have to they get another year of eligibility, which is going to help out a lot of these smaller schools, especially these freshmen coming in. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how rosters shake out for spring sports next year, especially baseball, where seniors are kind of held in a much higher light than every other player. It's going to be very interesting to see how that works out. And the possibility of not having football in the fall also brings interesting questions, because if we don't have football, those players get an extra year of eligibility, and we're going to have a completely different conversation about that if it comes to that. I'm still going to wait on that one. I'm going to wait until at least July before I even discuss the possibility of not having a football season, unless it gets announced before that, of course. But when we come back, we'll discuss the NBA Player Association vice president. He gives a perspective on the NBA season and what is there going to be a return, is there not. We'll discuss that when we come back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, as I've discussed before, as the coronavirus continues coming, I feel like I start every segment like this. I apologize if it seems like that, but I mean, it's a good intro for most of these topics, because most of these topics are about the coronavirus and how it's affecting the sports world, whether it be the NBA, the MLB, the NFL, college athletics. It's just the best way to introduce the topic, pretty much. I feel like I do introduce it like that every time, and I apologize for that, but we have an insider perspective from the NBPA, the National Basketball Players Association, vice president on COVID-19 and the NBA's uncertain return, because there's a lot of talk about when the NBA will return. They fully plan on completing the season, whether it be a shortened season or whether we just go straight into the playoffs when we come back, and the playoffs go until October, and then we start the new season and around Christmas time, stuff like that. I've went through some of these scenarios on the podcast before, and they're very interesting scenarios that I feel like would be really weird and really strange to actually fulfill these scenarios. But the problem, the fact of the matter is, the NBA season was close to being done. They had 20 games left. They were in the last stretch of the season. The NBA is fully, for TV reasons, we talked about TV rights last episode. For TV reasons, the NBA wants to get back on the court as soon as possible and start doing playoffs and stuff like that. But, what is the actual discussions like right now? As the coronavirus, it's not really slowing down. It's not really getting any better so far. States around the country are saying stay at home, do stuff like that. I know New York is having a rough time. I know playing all the games in a neutral site would be an option, which personally I believe they should all just play at a rec center. If you ever played rec league basketball, you know your rec league basketball usually has like four courts like together. They're kind of like they're like in the same gym. I think we should play like that with the curtains. Put the curtains down. I think that would be a lot of fun. And you get to choose which camera you want to watch. Anyways, I'm just talking off the top of my head right now. But what did the NBPA Vice President have to say about all this? When will we see NBA basketball? What would it take for players to feel safe about returning? What's the truth about player paychecks and the question of how much money they might miss out on the situation if it doesn't improve? Are the rumblings true that the playoffs could be held in a neutral location like we just discussed, somewhere like Las Vegas rather than inside NBA arenas? What was it like to learn that your teammates, including Kevin Durant, tested positive? These are all just questions that they discuss, that the Athletic article that I'm reading this from, which is Sam Amick and Joe Varden on the Athletic, they were talking to Brooklyn Nets guard Garrett Temple about this whole thing, living in the New York area. So they talked to him on their podcast, Tampering Podcast. There's no shortage of questions that Temple was qualified to answer. Not only is he a 33-year-old and a 10-year NBA veteran, but he's a vice president of the National Basketball Players Association with Chris Paul as president, Michelle Roberts as executive director, and a 9-player executive committee of which Temple is a part of. The NBA PA is sending a significant amount of time seeking answers to these very same questions these days. So, what are the Nets doing? What are the Brooklyn Nets doing offering support to their players during this time? Temple said, they brought us an exercise bike. The facility can be opened just in case I need treatment or rehab. The NBA allows people to go in for rehab, and Brooklyn is an area where we know we have what they need. The Nets are supplying us with groceries, with food, so it's consistent here. We know exactly what we're going to get, whereas if I go home to his home state in Louisiana, the workout process may be a little different. I don't know who's going to be in the gym when I'm working out, or if I can get a place where it's private. So we decided to stay here until we know for sure what's going to happen with the season. And then we figure that out. We'll make a decision from there. So they asked him what measures must be taken for players like him to feel safe playing again. He mentioned that he thinks that 45-minute test results is big. The ability to be able to test and get the results that quickly. There are even tests that return results in 5 minutes, with mass production reportedly starting this week. I agree that fans not being there is a plus, but I think we have a situation where we know the testing can be done, where we know whether the person has it in a much more timely manner, and we test right before we go into the facility. Wherever we end up playing, everybody gets tested. If we have enough tests to go around to do that, I feel comfortable enough that the league will have it under control to where we can play if all the players are negative. And whoever isn't negative, in terms of whoever needs to be in the facility, cannot go in the facility. I would feel comfortable if we have that, and also facilities being disinfected directly prior to us entering them. So I think those measures right now, as well as the basketball and everything in the facility, everything that will be used being disinfected prior to us using them, as well as people being tested before we enter. Nobody knows how that's going to look in terms of playoffs or after the next game do you continue doing that for each game, or during the playoffs, do people stay in the same area? It's an interesting situation that's going to unfold. So what about the Player Association discussion on these matters? He said, we've talked maybe 3 or 4 times at executive committee, maybe 5 times. We probably are going to talk again on Wednesday. It's so fluid. Everything that you're hearing is the same thing that we're hearing about the maybe mid-June to restart the season, depending on what happens with the curve. And obviously it would be in front of no fans. If 50 people or less changes, then you'd need at least 150, 200 people to actually run a game and have TV broadcast and everything like that. And depending on where we want to have the games, it's probably not the case that the games will be in NBA arenas. So what about player paychecks? Players will still be paid April 1st. there's no decision yet what will happen from that point forward. So over 400 guys are paid on a 12-month pay period, a pay schedule, so that's 24 paychecks annually, and April 1st would be the 10th paycheck out of 24, I believe, if not the 11th. The default pay plan is 24 payments through a 12-month period, and most guys, over 80% of the guys, get paid up until November 1st, and the next fiscal year starts November 15th. A lot of that was done to halt people that would go into the summertime and run through money, but because of that being April 1st, if you do the math, it's around 10 or 11 paychecks that have been paid out. So less than half of what we're owed has been paid. We've talked about, instead of stopping checks directly at whatever month they need to be stopped, more so reducing the amount that is given each check. But all of this is obviously ideas thrown around. We want to be ready for whatever happens. Hopefully the curve starts to go down and people start slowly getting back to normal life and we can begin our season and finish playing. So they talked about prospect playing in a neutral site like Vegas. It's ironic because we were talking with the NBA about the midseason tournament that the league has thought about doing for next year or the year after that, and the championship of that tournament being in a place like Vegas. Now we've come to a situation where we may have to play in one certain area. I guess Vegas is a place. Obviously, we know the league, the NBA, comes together for the summer league there. It's an area that we know, we understand, so it's definitely a possibility. It wouldn't be anything foreign to us because of the fact that the summer league is there every year. So that's basically what that conversation is. So it's good to know the players will be able to get paid until November. So hopefully we'll start a new season by the new fiscal year, which is November 15th. There are definitely serious discussions on having the NBA playoffs being played in Vegas only, in a neutral site arena in Vegas, which will be kind of beneficial for the NBA as well. I know there won't be fans, but it'll be a good way to drum up interest in the NBA in case they ever want to expand the NBA and add a Las Vegas team, which I know there have been rumors that they're going to add a Seattle team back, so that could be a way for them to add two teams right there or have another team go over to Las Vegas. But that is basically it. That is Garrett Temple's look on everything. He's the vice president for the NBA Player Association, like I mentioned before. The disinfect and testing players before every game. I just wonder when we'll have to stop doing that. It's going to be interesting to see how everything works out if the NBA does come back. They're making plans. They'll probably make a decision sooner rather than later. Or make a decision on at least what they want to do, and dates can be changed later. We'll see on that. When we come back, I'll talk about why Bill O'Brien sucks, which, most of you probably already know that, but describe it more when we return.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So the NFL free agency is still going on. Of course it is. It's kind of the only thing to really talk about here in this trying times of no sports. We can talk about free agency all day. There's still big time names like Jadeveon Clowney still available in free agency. You still have Jameis Winston. You got Cam Newton in free agency now. There's still a lot of big time news that can come out of free agency in the upcoming weeks. Hopefully it's weeks, so I can actually talk about stuff. I'm telling you, once Cam Newton signs, it's probably going to be a full show just on Cam Newton. Just saying, just because there's nothing else to talk about. But because of free agency, I started to think about, if I started thinking about it, I saw an article. The article is titled, Texans Bill O'Brien could already be the worst GM ever. It's written by Ross Tucker. Came out March 30th. I saw this article. I didn't even read it. I saw the title. And I was like, I don't really know any other GM that's worse than him, so yeah, sure. Purely based off of trades. I mean, of course, he's only been the GM for, I mean, he was technically the GM last year, but he wasn't officially the GM. He was like the temporary GM, but now they made him official. So last year he was technically not the full-time GM, but now he's the full-time GM. And his first trade as a full-time GM was trading your best receiver for pennies, which I'm still confused about. Trading DeAndre Hopkins a fourth-round pick for David Johnson and a second-round pick, which still doesn't make a lot of sense to me, in my opinion. We'll discuss that later. So free agency in the NFL is in the rearview mirror for the most part. NFL draft is coming up. It's 3 weeks away. We're still not sure how the NFL is going to do the draft and all that stuff, but it is coming up. What exactly is there to talk about in the world of sports in general and the NFL in particular? May I suggest Bill O'Brien? A compelling case can be made that the trade the Texans general manager / head coach recently made, sending DeAndre Hopkins to the Arizona Cardinals, is the worst in NFL history. All the television debate shows and sports talk radio shows can feel free to chew on that one for a day or two, which I will chew on that for a little bit. It's not wrong. I can't really think of a trade that is worse than that. I mean, you can think of the Herschel Walker trade that sent him to Detroit or something like that. But the Cowboys got billions of picks out of that one. I still argue that wasn't a bad trade. It wasn't that bad. I mean, Herschel Walker didn't pan out, but at the time it was not viewed as a bad trade. It turned into a bad trade. But has there ever been a trade that just right off the bat you were like, that's the worst trade I've ever seen? Right off the bat. Like, you don't care how the players perform afterward. You don't care how the Texans use that second round pick. Just the fact that they didn't get a first round pick makes that the worst trade I've ever seen. You traded a top 3 receiver in the league. Top 3 receiver. For basically a second round pick. Now the Texans don't have a first round pick. They have an aging running back. They no longer have a number 1 receiver. They got Randall Cobb, but Randall Cobb's not really a number 1 receiver. Randall Cobb is not a DeAndre Hopkins. So, already, right off the bat, I claim that the Texans lost this trade. This is the worst trade. But there's more. If you look at personnel decisions he has made since Brian Gain was surprisingly fired in June after just 17 months, I believe a strong argument can be made that he is also the worst GM of all time. Although there's a very small sample size. But this provides a healthy conversation for a couple of days, so let's talk about it. So, is he actually the worst GM ever? Was the Hopkins trade the worst one on record? I'm telling you, it is. But both are absolutely in discussion. It's not hyperbole. Oh my God, it's not hyperbole. It's not a hot take. So many people. I have yet to see one person say that was a good trade for the Texans. I have yet to see a single person say that was a good trade for the Texans. Let's start with the micro level with the Hopkins trade because it's a doozy. Hopkins has missed exactly 2 games in his 7 seasons in the NFL. He's 27 years old, coming off his 3rd straight All-Pro and Pro Bowl season. He's also under contract for the next 3 seasons at $13.3 million per year, which is a steal compared to Julio Jones, who's getting paid $22 per year, $22 mil, or Amari Cooper, who's getting $20 million per season that he just signed. Hopkins reportedly wants a new contract, and that clearly factored into the Texans' decisions. But managing those situations is part of the business of having a star player like Hopkins. He's without a question a top 5 wide receiver, and some would argue he's the best. The Texans traded him to the Cardinals for running back David Johnson and a second-round pick. The team swapped fourth-round picks as well. The fourth-round pick the Cardinals received is for this year, while the one they shipped to Houston is for 2021. So Arizona is getting a more valuable fourth-round pick of the two, which didn't even register on my radar. So the Cardinals get DeAndre Hopkins, and they get a fourth-round pick for this year's draft. which the Cardinals are technically still rebuilding, which their rebuild might be over now. I mean, that receiving core is going to be insane, but they're still technically rebuilding now. They're going to have a second-year head coach. They're going to have a sophomore quarterback in Kyler Murray, which once again, he had a very sneaky good year this past season. Nobody really talked about him because the Cardinals went like 4-12 or something like that. They kept their first-round pick. They got a more valuable fourth-round pick than the Texans. Whether it's the worst trade of all time really depends on how one feels about Johnson and his contract. The 28-year-old running back is coming off back-to-back seasons in which he averaged 3.7 yards per carry or worse. And most people saw concerning signs in his game, especially late in the season, that indicated his days as a quality running back were well behind him. The consensus among people I spoke to around the league is that nobody would have taken on Johnson's contract, which was $10.2 million guaranteed for 2020, with another $2.1 million guarantee in 2021. That means the Cardinals couldn't even have given him away. If they wanted to get out of the burden of that contract, they would have to give up a draft pick, and like the Texans did when they shipped Brock Osweiler, his $16 million guaranteed salary, and a second-round pick to Cleveland in 2017. That's how Michael Giannetti, who owns and operates the popular contract website SpotTrack, looked at the trade. To me, the second-round pick that Houston got from Arizona is canceled out by taking on the Johnson contract, which would mean that Hopkins was traded for basically nothing? Even if you think Giannetti is exaggerating the albatross of taking on Johnson. There is no question he reduces the value of the pick the Texans received. So did they trade arguably the best wide receiver with 3 palatable years on his contract for a 4th-round pick? No matter how you choose to value it, we are talking about a pittance compared to a 4th, 5th, 6th, and 6th-round picks the Vikings picked up when they traded Stephon Diggs, and a 7th-round pick the Buffalo Bills a few days later after the Hopkins trade. A simple search bringing up the worst trades of all time includes the Saints sending every pick in the draft in 1999, as well as first and third-round picks in 2000 to the Redskins for Ricky Williams, or the Vikings' infamous trade for the Cowboys. It was Vikings, Herschel Walker, not the Lions, it was the Vikings. But in those instances, the team known for making the terrible trade, at least it got a good player in return. The Texans, according to Giannetti and others, essentially gave up Hopkins for nothing, which is terrible. In August, he gave a 3rd-round pick to Cleveland for pass-catching running back Duke Johnson in an era in which smart teams continue to devalue running backs, giving up a 3rd-round pick in order to pay $4 million a year to a guy who had 410 rushing yards and 410 receiving yards is absurd. In September, Bill O'Brien traded his first-round picks over the next 2 years and a 2nd-round pick in 2021 and a couple of players for left tackle Jeremy Tunsil, wide receiver Kenny Stills, and a 4th-round pick in 2020 and 6th-round pick in 2021. He showed his lack of contract acumen by failing to get a long-term deal done with Tunsil at the time of the trade, as the left tackle now has incredible leverage and will become the highest-paid offensive lineman ever when he signs his next contract. Plus, Stills' contract was one of the Dolphins were looking to shed, and O'Brien gladly took that one. So the trades for Tunsil and Duke Johnson were an indication that the Texans were all in on the 2019 season, looking to seize the rare opportunity of having a franchise quarterback on his rookie contract, right? Wrong. Shortly after trading Tunsil, O'Brien sent defensive end Jadeveon Clowney, who had been giving the franchise tag, to the Seattle Seahawks for a 3rd-round pick and a couple role players in Jacob Martin and Barkevious Mingo. It was only made more curious when the Texans decided to pay $7 million of Clowney's $15 million contract. It would be hard to make that up, but it's true. Even the 3rd-round pick they sent to the Raiders for Garyon Conley in October seems rich. He's an inconsistent cornerback, and the Texans may not even exercise a 5th-year contract option, meaning they would have him for only 1 more year. Then you have, of course, the Hopkins trade, but we've already been there and done that. Any discussion for worst GMs in NFL history will bring up names like Matt Millen, Mike Brown, but Bill O'Brien is definitely going to be up there in the list now. I mean, those are some terrible trades. Terrible. When we return, we'll talk about the Michael Jordan documentary that has got moved up. Thanks, ESPN.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So we are starving for sports content, as I've discussed many times before. We are starving for it. I am starving for it. I've been watching marble racing. I've been watching fake college basketball. And then last night, I sat down, and my girlfriend and I, we started watching The Voice. I watched The Voice for the first time. I'm kind of into it. That's how dire the situation is right now. I'm getting into The Voice. And, I'm going to be honest, Blake Shelton's funny. He's a funny guy. But anyways, we are starved for sports content. ESPN has nothing really going on. They're doing SportsCenter all day. ESPN Radio, they've been talking about Tiger King on Netflix, which is also Tiger King. Man, here's a good question. Would Tiger King be anywhere near as popular if sports were around? That's a good question. I feel like it would. I feel like people are so starved for content that they will watch any trash. I feel like reality TV shows are going through the roof right now. Or at least the ones that already recorded their episodes, which is most of them. I feel like reality TV is going through the roof right now. It's crazy. I mean, I watched one episode of Love is Blind. You saw that on Netflix. It's basically where these people talk to each other. They don't see each other. And then they get engaged without ever seeing each other. And it's crazy. I don't know. But I'm into it because there's nothing else to watch. Anyways, so ESPN has graced us with their they've graced us with their what is it, kindness, I guess. They are releasing the most anticipated documentary in ESPN history on April 19th. I'm, of course, talking about The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. It was originally going to be released in July, I think, but they have moved it up to April 19th because there's such a lack of everything. They probably didn't move it up to... They probably could have moved it up to, like, tomorrow, but, they probably need to do more promotions with the new date and everything like that. So on Tuesday morning, ESPN announced The Last Dance, highly anticipated 10-part documentary series examining Michael Jordan's final season with the Bulls in 97-98, will air on ESPN on Sunday nights over 5 weeks from April 19th through May 17th. 2 episodes will debut each week over those 5 weeks. The series will also be available outside the U.S. on Netflix. The episodes debuting the day after the U.S. And then in the U.S., the episodes will be put on Netflix a day after they debut. New York Post first reported ESPN would move the documentary up to April on Monday night. So this Jordan doc had originally been scheduled to debut in June, not July, I apologize. But the absence of live sports in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic prompted ESPN executives to change their programming timetable. As society navigates this time without live sports, viewers are still looking to the sports world to escape and enjoy a collective experience, ESPN said in a statement. We've heard the calls from fans asking us to move up the release date for this series, and we're happy to announce that we've been able to accelerate the production schedule to do just that. This project celebrates one of the greatest players and dynasties ever, and we hope it can serve as a unifying entertainment experience to fill the role that sports often play in our lives, telling a story that will captivate everyone, not just the sports fan. So, of course, the documentary includes, among other interviews, Jordan's many teammates such as Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, former coaches Phil Jackson, Roy Williams, and other well-known names such as former President Barack Obama, the late Kobe Bryant, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, Justin Timberlake, and Bob Costas. Immediately following each episode's ESPN premiere, the episodes will be available on authenticated subscribers on the ESPN app via mobile and connected TV devices, ESPN.com and ESPN On Demand via cable, satellite, and the DMVPD distributors. The Last Dance is directed by Jason Heer, who delivered a terrific documentary 2 years ago for HBO on Andre the Giant, which if you've never seen the Andre the Giant documentary, that is a fantastic documentary as well. It really goes through it goes through the highs of Andre the Giant's career, where he's literally the top wrestler in the world. He's the top attraction in the world. And then it also goes through the lows of him realizing that he's not going to live very long because of his condition and because of, he chose wrestling to do. He had terrible problems going on, but it's a great documentary to watch about all of that. It's on HBO. So Hare said the full portraiture of a documentary subject prior to the Andre debut. Hare said, "Anytime I do a sports film, I feel very beholden to the family of the subjects and also the diehard fan. They are the ones I think about. One of the rules we went into this film with, knowing the mythology that surrounds him and how outlandish it could be, was we would only allow first-person accounts in this movie. I did not want to hear, I heard he drank 156 beers. But if it is a long-time WWE employee, Pat Patterson, and Hulk Hogan being at a hotel when Andre passed out in the lobby, yes, it is still vague. They could be lying, but at least it's a first-person account. I feel like we missed some bigger stories because people heard them secondhand. But once you open that can of worms, it has the potential to become a farcical and fiction versus a documentary. In addition to the main producers, ESPN and Netflix, NBA Entertainment is a producer on the film, along with Mandalay Sports Media and Jordan's Jump 23 company, and provided never-before-seen footage from 97-98 season. Given the length of the documentary, the series will examine Jordan's life prior to his final season in Chicago, including the Bulls' first 5 championships prior to 1998. For some viewership perspective on ESPN's long-running 30 for 30 series, the 2012 documentary You Don't Know Bo has so far drawn the most viewers for a debut episode with 3.6 million viewers. Michael Jordan and the 90s Bulls weren't just sports superstars, they were a global phenomenon, here the director said in a statement. Making The Last Dance was an incredible opportunity to explore the extraordinary impact of one man and one team. For nearly 3 years, we searched far and wide to present the definitive story of an era-defining dynasty and to present these sports heroes as humans. I hope viewers enjoy watching our series as much as we enjoy the opportunity to make it. ESPN, of course, has had massive success with previous documentary of this ambition. I'm, of course, talking about the 10-part documentary on O.J. Simpson, O.J. Made in America. It's the best programming the network has ever produced, according to some people. It was thrilling, uncompromising filmmaking by director Ezra Edelman, clocking in at 7 hours, 43 minutes. Ultimately won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature at the 2017 Academy Awards. So what is the schedule? So let's go through the schedule real quick. The Last Dance schedule, all on ESPN. And of course, like I said, it will be available a day after. So the first episode, the first 2 episodes will be Sunday, April 19th, which is episode 1, episode 2. Then the next Sunday, they'll show the repeat of the previous episodes. Then they'll show the 2 new episodes. They're doing 2 hour-long episodes every Sunday until May 17th. And then, like I said, they'll be available on Netflix the day after. So I think this will be very interesting because as a person who I grew up at the tail end of Michael Jordan's career. I remember playing NBA Live 2003. Michael Jordan was on the Wizards. So that's pretty much, the only really, because I was born in 96. So the only real basketball I ever watched Michael Jordan play was in Space Jam and for the Washington Wizards. So I don't really have that much experience with Michael Jordan on the Bulls. So I think this is going to be a very interesting documentary, like it said, following one of the best dynasties in sports with the best player. And then you have characters like Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. You got Steve Kerr in there as well. Steve Kerr is hilarious. If you've never seen Steve Kerr's parade speech after one of the championships, where he took the game-winning shot in Game 6, I think, of one of the championships, one of the finals, he's on the podium. He's just like, they went into the huddle, and he just goes, the coach says, we need to get we need to get our best shooter to the ball, and Kerr is just like, guys, okay, Michael, I'll do it. It's funny. You should look it up. It's a good parade speech. But it's going to be interesting. A lot of good characters. It's going to be very historical, I bet. I don't know where this unaired footage came from, but apparently, I mean, they've had it for a while. But I cannot wait to watch this. It's going to be, 10 hours long? Well, it's going to be a little less than that because of commercials and stuff like that. But it's going to be a great watch with unseen footage before. We're going to see how Michael Jordan, how he acted towards the end of his career was like, and how others reacted around him. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a good watch. So when we return, I'm going to keep on the topic of sports movies. I'm going to replace the random sport of the day. Just for today, we're going to talk about sports movies when we come back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
So, there is no random sport of the day. I apologize. I know everybody's disappointed about that, but it had to happen. There's just just can't do it. Can't do it today. But we do have, The Athletic came out with the top 100 sports movies on The Athletic. They put them all in there. It's based off of their staff scores. And then it's based off of Rotten Tomatoes scores as well. But it's mostly based off staff scores. So the top 100 sports movies, I'm going to go through this list. And we're going to keep going through this list every week or every show until I finish it. So, whatever. So number 100, let's go straight into it. Number 100, and I will tell you whether I've seen the movie or not, and if I've seen the movie, I'll give you my opinion on it. Number 100, The Pride of the Yankees, 1942. Average rating of 72.14. It's the ultimate old Hollywood sports biography. Pride of the Yankees is a love story between Gary Cooper's Gehrig and Teresa Wright's Eleanor, as is a sports movie, and that's okay because the chemistry with Cooper and Wright is more than enough to make up for the less than authentic sports scenes. Newt Rockne, All-American, may have the win one for the Gipper speech, but nothing tops Cooper's delivery of Lou Gehrig's Luckiest Man speech, which screenwriters Joe Swerling and Herman Mankiewicz reordered. Yet, for me, one of the movie's most poignant moments comes after the speech, as Cooper walks off the field of the tunnel and the number 4 on his back as the umpire yells, "Play ball. Gehrig may be gone, but life in the game goes on." That's from Peterson, wrote that little excerpt on The Athletic. I've never seen this movie. It's from 1942. I don't watch many movies from 1942. I'll probably look up some some scenes of it, I guess, but I've never seen that movie. But I like Lou Gehrig. So number 99, Ali, 2001. I'm pretty sure that's the movie with Will Smith playing Muhammad Ali. I have not seen it. I think it goes without saying that people like Will Smith, though. He's one of the most charismatic and entertaining personalities of the past 30 years. Not many people give him credit for being a legitimate great actor. Ali changed that perception quickly as he embodied every nuance of the legendary boxer, from his mannerisms to his signature speaking cadence. Smith ended up losing the Best Actor award to Denzel Washington's iconic performance in Training Day, and Muhammad Ali probably deserves a better movie than Ali to do his career justice. But I'd definitely be willing to cast Will Smith in that role again. So there's Ali, average score of 72.17. Number 98, I have seen this one, Varsity Blues. from 1999, average rating of 72.18, so barely edging out All-E there. This isn't a great movie. This is the excerpt. This isn't a great movie. I'm not even sure it's a good one, but it was never intended to be. It's a fun movie filled with memorable characters, and if you were in high school in the late 90s, you'll feel right at home. And remember, never say no when Darcy Sears asks if you'll take whipped cream with that ice cream. So, it's an okay movie. I mean, it's okay. I don't really have much else to say about that. I haven't watched it in a while, but it's an okay movie. Number 97, Above the Rim, 1994, average rating of 72.64. How is Above the Rim widely beloved? Let me count the ways. The soundtrack, the screen-bursting magnetism, and the menace of Tupac Shakur as Birdie, Tommy Shepard walking onto the court at halftime and shooting 30 for 30 in his corduroy pants in a shootout tournament final. But in New York, Above the Rim is bigger than that. I was a month shy of turning 12 when the film came out, playing for a recreation center travel team with future all-city high school teammates. My job was to rebound and set screens for Smush Parker. We played on the same courts in the same gyms where Above the Rim was shot. We wore the same shorts from Olaf's, the Harlem Hoops Institution. We saw our basketball lives on screen, set to music by the Dog Pound and Tupac. I don't know if I ever felt greater. So this is from Bartholomew, who wrote that excerpt. I've never seen Above the Rim. It sounds interesting, though. It's got Tupac in it, which is interesting to me. Number 96, Beyond the Mat, 1999. I have seen this one. It's an average rating of 72.86. It's a documentary that bears a human toll on pro wrestlers, even 2 decades later. The behind-the-scenes footage is heartbreaking and inspiring. You might not really understand what these performers do, but after watching this, you'll appreciate why they do it. So Beyond the Mat is a really good documentary. If you like wrestling, you have to watch Beyond the Mat. It is intimate, revealing, highly entertaining, critically acclaimed look at wrestling. Takes viewers beyond the ring and into the lives of men and women who inhabit this colorful, competitive, and surprisingly complex world of wrestling. So, great documentary there. 95, Bloodsport, 1988, average rating of 72.91. How legendary is Bloodsport? Perhaps this will help explain. I'm not fluent in Spanish, never have been, but I have watched the entirety of a Spanish-language version of Bloodsport without subtitles before. Absolutely I have, because Frank Dux' pursuit of Kumite glory transcends language. It's the ultimate Van Damme flick, sucking you in and refusing to let go until the reign of that cheat Chong Li is over for good. So, I don't know what this is. I've never seen Bloodsport. I've never even heard of it, to be honest. But sounds interesting, to say the least. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a martial arts movie, maybe? I'm looking at stills of it. Yeah, it's martial arts. That's an interesting movie. Anyways, 94, Mystery Alaska, 1999. I don't know what this is either. I'm learning more than I thought I would. Apparently I haven't seen many sports movies. Jeez. The plot is a little thin. A group of Saturday afternoon amateurs try to stay competitive in 1999 New York Rangers in an outdoor exhibition game, but the scenery is breathtaking and the movie will resonate with anyone that ever played shinny as a kid on a shivery winter day and dreamed of playing in the NHL. Burt Reynolds is a great turn as an overbearing hockey dad who has come to Jesus moment, and Russell Crowe wearing a Gretzky-era Jaffa helmet is a pitch-perfect finishing touch. So this is a hockey movie, which is probably why I haven't watched it, because I just recently got into hockey. Number 93, Secretariat, 2010, average rating of 73.11. Even though I knew Big Red would win by 31 lengths, seeing his Belmont Stakes record run recreated was thrilling in this movie. Secretariat the horse was greatness in living color, and Secretariat the movie is focused on showing greatness. No underdog story here, just Diane Lane and the Secretariat dominating. So, I haven't seen this one. I've heard a lot of good things about Secretariat, though. Not very interested in it, in my opinion. I'm not very interested in it, because, I mean, I know Secretariat was dominant. I mean, it's cool to see a dominating story, I guess, but people like underdogs a lot more, so Secretariat is not, I don't know. 91 is tied. We have two movies with a average rating of 73.31. You got Paper Lion, which is from 1968, and then you have Youngblood from 1986. We'll talk about Youngblood first, which is about a pretty boy hockey player, Rob Lowe, gets roughed up, quits, learns how to fight in the family barn, returns to kick Rocky's ass in the big game. Serves him right. That cheap shot. This excerpt's killing me. If you like 80s movies, this hits all the tropes. Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves, and a training montage set to music. So that sounds like a good movie. Actually, I might check that out. Paper Lion, designed to make sports writer Bill Plimpton, played by Alan Alda, a sympathetic figure in the rough and tumble NFL. It fails in that regard, and Plimpton generally seems unlikable. But Detroit Lions defensive tackle Alex Karras turns the movie into a winner with his outsized personality and everyman approach. So, I haven't seen that either. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to change my mind here. So what I'm going to do, I'm only going to do 10. I'm going to do the next one, and then we're done. And then after that, we're going to do, well, technically I already did 10, but we're going to do 90, and then after 90, I'm going to save the rest for the Thursday show. And I'm going to try to watch every single one of these. It might be difficult, because I don't know how I'm going to watch them. I'm not sure how many of these are on streaming platforms or whatever, but I'll figure something out. I'm going to try to watch some of these and give my full opinion on some of them at a later date. So this is going to be continuing. It gives me a segment to talk about. I mean, so I can choose 5 topics instead of 6. But anyways, so that's what I'm going to do there. So 90, Heaven Can Wait, 1978, average rating 73.39. I have not seen this one either. 7-year-old completely obsessed with the Rams uniforms. Interesting. Interesting considering the Rams changed their logo and stuff like that. The guy begged his dad to take him to his movie. This is the guy writing the expert. He's obsessed with Rams uniforms. He did finally came to a single screen theater located in Main Street in my hometown. Comedic precision of Dean Cannon and Charles Grodin escaped my younger self. I only cared about seeing more climatic game action when Warren Beatty body hopped his way to the Super Bowl. Kudos to Beatty for not embarrassing himself while throwing those crossing routes and for taking repeated flattenings from Deacon Jones when a stunt double could have sufficed. Write a song about that. 9 Oscar nominations and a plot that blossomed into reality a year late when the Rams actually faced the Steelers in Super Bowl. Super Bowl, what is that, 14? So yeah, that's good stuff. That's from Alan Taylor, West Virginia Big 12 staff writer. Heaven Can Wait, 1978. That sounds like an interesting movie. So there we go. That's the first 11, I guess. 11 movies on the Athletics Top 100 Sports Movies. I've only seen like one of them. So I have a lot to watching to go. But thank you for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you on Thursday. Like, rate, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at @Strickland_Josh, and I'll talk to you all on Thursday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.